let them talk.
Okay. So, based on the communication that was received by the mayor and the vice mayor, I reached out to Chief Sullivan and asked him some questions about the adjudication of some of these pending cases. There was an incident a while back where a dog or two dogs attacked a cat in that area, and there was an incident out there. The animal control officer with the county, who actually does enforce, in addition to our code, also enforces the county's regulations regarding animals, has been pursuing, has actually filed charges in a couple instances. One of them did get dismissed for a technical reason, which the county is now going back and filing new charges. There is a hearing pending on February 3rd, I think the chief told me. And essentially, it's our opinion, mine and the chief's opinion, that the county is doing their due diligence on this. I realize that it might take a while before it can work itself through the court system, but I believe from what I've heard and what from the chief told me, that they are, and what you told me from your conversation with the state's attorney, that they're doing everything they can to try to rectify this issue. So hopefully that's enough, but I certainly would like to hear any comments that are available.
Okay, Mr. Grumman, if you would come forward and state your name and address. Am I pronouncing it
Well,
correctly?
we were here to talk about the elder spirit dog situation, so.
Yeah, well, now's the time to do it.
All right.
Thank you, sir, and ma'am. My name is Howard Randall Grumpill. I go by the name of Randy. I'm 88 years old and a member of Elder Spirit. Recently came here, just last year. I'm here about dangerous dogs that are running loose. They have killed 2 chickens and a cat. They're pit bulls. There's a petition signed by 27 members of Elder Spirit that I will give you a copy of in just a minute. There's a Forbes article that I will also give you a copy of. The most dangerous dog breed are the pit bulls. Over a 13-year period, they killed 284 people in the United States, including one 4-year-old child. In 2015, 28,000 people required reconstructive surgery because of pit bulls. The average cost for that surgery was $18,200. There is an owner of a pit bull who is pit bulls, I think, who is named Sterling Van Ellison. He has a significant criminal record and a significant record about dogs that have been loose, and dogs that have been labeled by the courts as dangerous dogs that don't have licenses even at times. I also would like to give you an article by Dogs Bite, and I will distribute, if you don't mind, some of the criminal record that I've mentioned. Can I?
Sure.
Here's petitions. Sure. Here's the Forbes article, which is really interesting. I have several copies of that. I didn't print enough copies. I didn't know how many people you were. I'm sorry about that. And here's an article on Dogs Bite. And here's a partial list of the dog's owners' police record.
You may want to keep that original there.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can we
Any
have,
questions, or
can we have
is
copies?
that it?
Yes, sir, I have some questions. And I don't know if the other council members do. This matter's come before us before, and I need to find out, I think, in order for us to make any progress, what you understand and what we understand. I understand that this is the county's responsibility according to the code. It seems to me, what was conveyed to me and Ms. Patterson, were that described this matter as, you've been here before, and we've conveyed to you that that's the case.
Yes.
And it's described as something about it being a gray area and a ping pong ball. And you guys feel like we should do something. And I guess this petition makes a request as to what we should do. Could you enlighten us on the ping pong ball? What do you, I don't know if that's what your group says. Can you tell us, describe why you feel that way?
It's a ping pong ball in part because this has been ongoing since 1997, and there's been there have been police reports. My understanding from the people in the elder spirit community is that the man doesn't pay fines; he ignores them. I don't know what happens then, and at any rate, the dogs continue once in a while to roam the area. Usually, if there is a public concern and Mr. Ellison hears about it, the dogs are kept quiet for several weeks, and then they show up again. So that's my concern. It has been before the courts, and I think the last time was in December of last year. And so we're frustrated and concerned. We're concerned that we have a lot of elderly people, and we see them around, and we're worried for ourselves.
Well, and I'm personally at a loss as to how we can help in this situation, and I think, I invited you here because I wanted to hear if you have any recommendations for us as to how we might help in this situation, because we are not it's like the school system. We don't have anything to do with the school system. We don't really have anything to do with animal control. We may be able to help some way if you could enlighten us as to how we might do that.
Mr. Mayor, I think the best thing we can do is ask Mr. Morandi and/or the Chief of Police to follow up on it and to keep us and the residents of Elder Spirit informed about what's happening with the progress.
Yeah, I can send some information to the mayor,
Controlling those
and I
dogs.
can forward it to all the council members about the status of the case. The issue, the issue right now is, and the reason why nothing's happened immediately, and you could jump in here and correct me if I'm wrong, but before the court can do anything, the dogs have, and you made this comment earlier, the dogs have to be ruled by the court to be dangerous dogs. That hasn't happened yet. There was a charge filed, but it had to be rolled back because that determination had not been made by the court. Once a determination is made by the court that these are dangerous dogs based on criteria set forth in the statute, at that point, if they are found to be running at large, and you were to call the animal control officer of the county, or even the police, if it was after hours or even during the day, if we weren't able to get into contact with the animal control, then at that point, and maybe I'll turn it over to you, and you can explain what would happen then. But it's really speculation until we get to that point. And I believe that's what the February court hearing is about. Is that correct? Okay. It is to determine whether or not the dogs are dangerous. So I would advise you, if, I don't know what the format of,
Okay.
you don't want to give, of course I'm not going to advise them, I'm not an attorney, but I was going to tell them to stay on top of that case is what I was going to say, to follow it, because, or even show up to the case if it's a public, it's in a courtroom, a public courtroom, to listen to what's going on. I couldn't tell you what the adjudication of that's going to be until the hearing has been concluded.
I may be mistaken, maybe
Yeah.
I'm confused, but I believe there has been a court hearing. I believe they have been designated as dangerous dogs, and I think you'll find that in the list that I gave you. I think.
Well,
I'm
no,
not sure-
actually, that's not, the information we got is not,
And
let him.
to take a step back on all these things, the town has an ordinance, section 10-29B. It says specifically, it shall be the duty of the county animal warden to enforce the provisions of this section, which includes dogs running at large. So we have said in past, and this has been in place since 1985, that the county is in charge of this. And it appears from the reports that we've gotten, and none of the town officials have been involved in this directly. The Chief Sullivan has been involved with it indirectly, but the Officer Justice, who is the county deputy sheriff, who's in charge of the animal warden for the county, has been the lead on this. As I understand it, and I haven't talked to any of these people directly, I have had a brief conversation with the Commonwealth's attorney. I've talked to Mr. Moraney, and he's relayed some things that Chief Sullivan has told me, but there's a state statute that says, as an aside, that you can't designate any dog breed by itself as dangerous just because it's that breed. The state statute says that. But the format is that 3.2-6540, any law enforcement officer or animal control officer has reason to believe that a canine within his jurisdiction is a dangerous dog may apply to a magistrate serving the jurisdiction for the issuance of a summons requiring the owner or custodian, if known, to appear before a general district court at a specified time. And if that happens, then the judge determines whether the dog is dangerous. If the dog is ruled dangerous, then there are certain restrictions that the owner or custodian is put under, including registering that dog. You have to put a special tag. You have to confine the dog. If the owner then violates the sections of the statute after the dog has been labeled dangerous, then that's can be a misdemeanor. It can be a felony in certain circumstances. But sort of the predicate determination has to be made first. And my review of that is that part hasn't happened yet. And I think that's why the last case got dismissed, was that the charge was a violation of the statute when there hadn't yet been a determination that the dog or dogs were dangerous. But that's all my reading between the lines. And I
Yeah,
haven't seen
that's
the rest of
consistent
it.
with what the chief has told me, and that's where they have to get a determination from the court that it is a dangerous dog. Once that is done, then anytime it would not be in compliance with the statute, then a charge could be brought up under that same section.
Boy, maybe I'm confused. I'm 88 years old now.
Yeah.
I think I presented to you some of the court records that there's a conviction related to the dogs being dangerous.
Actually, those were dismissed. There are two charges, and they were dismissed. But I understand that there are new ones that are to be heard, and it isn't on this listing that we have in February. And for your benefit and for the council's benefit, as Ms. Moraney said, law enforcement is very engaged in this process. Everybody knows what's going on. The Commonwealth's attorney called me back yesterday in the midst of a murder investigation to address this dog issue with me. So everyone is investigating this to the extent that they can. I agree, as a legal matter with the mayor, there isn't really anything that the council can do. As a practical matter, we have delegated this authority to the animal warden. It appears that the animal warden is taking this issue on. I believe that the residents have been informed by the chief of police. The animal warden works certain hours apparently, that if there is an immediate issue, then they can call the Abingdon police and the police will respond. But this sort of structured statutory procedure is something that the animal warden has to take care of. And as we understand it, there have been sort of fits and starts as to that, but it seems like everything is kind of in motion. And I'm not making any statement about, I don't know whose dogs they are. I'm not seeing the dogs. I don't know any of the evidence about it one way or the other, but it sounds like this process has been engaged and appears to be going forward.
Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you.
One more thing that I want to say to you. It's obvious that your frustration level is very high, and if I lived in your neighborhood, mine would too. You've come to the governing body of the town with your frustrations. Ms. Patterson, I believe, has suggested, Vice Mayor Patterson has suggested to Ms. Tallman that you do likewise with the county
Okay.
and contact their governing body.
Thank you.
We have no control over their personnel, but if our personnel aren't performing in the way that we're supposed to by code,
Okay.
then we will address that issue. So I suggest that you stay in touch with your elected representative and your county administrator, and we'll try to stay in. As Mr. Bradley says, our staff will keep track of the situation, and if there are any snags, we'll try to help in any way we can.
Thank you, Mayor Craig.
And
I
I just
appreciate
want to
it.
say, we are concerned, and thank you for letting us know what's going on,
Okay.
okay?
Appreciate your concern.
You're welcome.
The next speaker is Ms. Miano. Oh, Mr. Miano, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to come and make myself aware of the council and how things worked. I do own a business in town. I'm cornered on two sides by the Creeper Trail Extension. And I am happy with what's happened there so far. I'm looking forward to you following up on the rest of it. I did sign a letter of agreement back in the spring or early summer concerning the repair of a wall that was damaged during the sewer extension. And that was supposed to be done by the end of July, and there have been several things that caused it to be postponed. But I haven't spoken to the new management in that area, and I will. But I just wanted to understand how this process worked. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all of our speakers.
Want to speak, John?
The
Yeah.
Sean?
Y'all want to hear?
Oh, do you know, you have a background about that?
I know what, I think
Okay.
I know what Mr. Merrill's talking
Yeah,
about.
why don't you step up and they can
Okay.
inform us as to what.
This has been something that I've become educated on since I started back in November, and tell me, I'm pretty sure this is what you're speaking of. It's over on Fuller Street.
That's correct.
That's correct. Fuller and Elm Street, the urban path went through that, makes that section, actually makes the turn down at that intersection, like Mr. Mount said, on two sides of his property. Several years ago, we replaced a sewer line on Elm Street, and during that construction, the Elm Street side of a retaining wall, block retaining wall, was damaged, and the town replaced the wall at that time. In the last year, I guess, when I wasn't here in this role, but I understand that there was an agreement made to replace the section of wall along Fuller Street. And since November, I know that we have worked with a consultant about a possible design for that wall to reconstruct it. We've received some feedback on that. I have some opinions on the wall that I think is appropriate for that location. And we've already engaged the same contractor that worked on the urban path. We've engaged with that contractor to build that wall. So it is something we're moving forward with. I wasn't aware of the timeline that he mentioned, but it's something.
Neither of us were here when that happened.
Yeah, right. So, but.
So it was new to me. You informed me of something.
But
That's where I came to,
Yeah.
But I can tell you now, we are, like I said, engaged with the contractor, and we plan on hopefully starting construction fairly soon. It's dependent on weather and his his schedule, his ability to get his crews back out here, so.
Is it on his, partially on his property?
Is
Is that why we were,
It's actually, I don't believe it's on the property, but it's adjacent to, and it's in it, the retaining wall is holding up.
it needs to be there?
Fuller Street, yeah, it
Yeah,
needs to be
okay.
there, above.
It's not aesthetic or anything,
Well,
it
there's
actually
a
needs.
sidewalk, and
Yeah.
the sidewalk was washed out, and so it buckled up. And I did notice a couple of months ago, they came and put some cement over that hump. You know, people do use that to bike ride and walk.
Yeah, it's something that needs to be corrected, because it's not a good sidewalk. It was a temporary patch to get rid of just a really abrupt change elevation. So it was just temporary, but when we get in there and build the wall, we're gonna reconstruct that section of the sidewalk there and redo the wall at the same time.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.
Okay, new business, item 1, discussion regarding proposed amendment to Town of Abingdon Code, Part 2, Code Chapter 2, Section 296, Mr. Moran.
Before I get into that, so he doesn't have to stay for the whole meeting, I wanted to introduce everybody to Mr. Matt Henderson. He's our new facilities maintenance manager. Started on Tuesday. He's working under John. You know, our goal is over the next month or so to kind of transition some of these projects to him. So if I understand he has a speech prepared or some sort.
If we got time to speech, we rehearsed it downstairs, it was about an hour and a half.
That's out of order.
I just
Give us some
wanted-
specs on generator.
Anyhow, I just wanted to make sure everybody had a chance to.
Well, welcome.
Thank you. I
Right
will
here.
say we're excited to have him.
Good to know you.
Yeah.
I will say quickly too, we drove around yesterday with Jason Boswell and Rick Statzer to look at some of the town's facilities, and we probably drove for about an hour and covered a lot of places, a lot of locations, a lot of town property and that sort of thing. But I hung around a little bit last night and sent him an email with that list of those items and a total of 56 facilities for him and items for him to look after. So
Wow.
I got him a pretty good challenge to start with. So. And he showed up again this morning. So that's a good sign.
That's a good
That
sign.
is a good
So I
sign.
welcome him.
When are those 56 items going to be complete?
What was your
Welcome.
title?
We're glad to have you.
Anyhow, so what we have here is, this was sort of, this came up, this draft proposal to change the section of the code came up basically through discussions with me and Cam and Kim about our procedures for when we publicize ordinances, when ordinances take effect. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bell so he can explain what it is we're changing here and maybe some basis as to why we want to change it.
Sure. And council passed, and there actually are other localities that have our exact ordinance of mirrors 2-96. It wasn't clear to us, and I think to the mayor, about when the council could do away with a second reading of ordinances. And we've had some discussion, we can have other discussion at a different time about when public hearings are required and when you have to have a first hearing and a second reading of the ordinances. This just makes clear when an emergency measure can be passed and when the second reading can be waived by council. And then in B, it currently says that the ordinances don't take effect until 30 days after. So we have a first reading, then a second reading, and then after it passes at the second reading, then there's 30 more days before it goes into effect. And so the wheels can turn very slowly, kind of unnecessarily. There are ordinances throughout the Commonwealth. Some say that they're effective immediately. Some say 10 days, some say 30 days. So we thought it made more sense to make it effective at its passage rather than have this extra time added in. So that mostly is just to clear up the grammar and to make things clearer that the council can waive the second reading. Past councils did that routinely, waive the second reading unless it was something controversial. So their interpretation was under the prior language, you could do that anyway. I think this makes it clear that just circumstances under which the council can waive the second reading.
Any questions, council? Would you like for this to be put on the February agenda for action?
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
Does it require a motion?
No.
Do we still have to have that silly question about,
Not unless
on
you
the
want
first
to vote,
reading?
Al. If you want to make a motion and vote, we'll do it.
What's that silly question on the first reading we have to contend with?
Shall this be rejected?
Shall this be rejected?
Do we still have to do that?
We could have put that in our charter amendment.
Al, do you want me to follow orders or not?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I'm just asking if we still have to do that.
I like-
Cam says it's in our charter.
I like that in there, because then we get some definitive, then everybody just doesn't look at each other and go, everybody
Huh?
like it, you know? Let's make a decision, take a stand.
Yeah,
Yes, that
make a
question
motion.
has been enshrined, Mr. President.
Let's just make a motion and do something with it.
All right, second item is discussion regarding amendment to section 2-129 fire department. Mr. Moran.
This is just to clarify, we amended the charter, and for council's benefit, our charter amendment is now a House bill to be voted on by the General Assembly during this session. But this makes the portion of the charter that we deleted, repealed, that the town manager appoints the fire department officer.
This clears up the nightmare that I had at the last meeting, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The fire department.
Which nightmare was that? Which nightmare was that?
It's all about me.
Which one was it? That's hilarious. All right, you want this on the agenda, council?
Please.
All right. Kim, put it on the agenda, please. The next item is discussion regarding proposed amendment to Town of Abingdon Code Part 2, Chapter 2, Administration Article 5, Procurement.
I'll handle this one. You may recall, I think we might have discussed this in a work session previously. This is just essentially, we're putting it in draft form, what the language will be to amend our code, just to say that we'll comply with the Public Procurement Act. That's essentially what this does.
Okay? It's been in your packet, council. You ready to vote on this next meeting?
Yes, sir.
All right.
And this one will go through
Ready to
two
vote on
readings,
it this
obviously. So it won't be effective until.
Moving right along. Item 4, discussion regarding proposed amendments to Town of Abingdon Code Part 2, Chapter 74, Utilities, Article 2, Sewers and Sewage Disposal. Mr. Moran.
Yes, sir. After we had several meetings with our sort of ad hoc I&I committee, which is really just a meeting with the mayor and a bunch of staff and him yelling at us, but I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. We love you.
I'll never get reelected.
So what this came out of was our I&I study, and we learned as we looked at our code, while we were trying to address some issues with the collection system and how we could address those with property owners and whatnot, we also took a little bit more of a comprehensive look at the rest of the code. And we have a couple, there's two documents in your packet. The first one deals with capacity, and John's gonna get into it in a little bit. Not yet. I know you're anxious, but just wait. About some of the results of the I&I, but he'll get into the fact that we do have an area of town where we have capacity issues. So there's really nothing in our code that states that the town council or staff can put a moratorium on new connections in the event that a capacity issue has been reached. So after discussing this matter with Cam, he recommended that we just put additional language into this section of the code that town manager or designee, if I wanted to delegate that authority to the public works director or town engineer, to reject any application for service if there became a capacity issue. But that's obviously going to be based on engineering studies. We do have one now, but that's the crux of this amendment to the code in section 74-34. The other one, the one behind it, really the only thing this is doing is taking, before, now, you see, this was the second red line. Remind me what, remind me what we were changing, because I know we were adding the town manager, but I think we were.
There were just
It was-
portions of the ordinances that said, facilities manager and just
It said
inconsistent.
facilities manager, that's right. And this was the second red line, and so we replaced facilities manager with town manager, that's why, okay.
Just to make clear who the decision maker is, the town manager or designee about these various
Right.
portions of the
Yeah.
city.
And ultimately, it's just a matter, so we don't want to have to come back to the council anytime there's really an operational issue, if there's a determination that needs to be made. And facilities manager was kind of vague, so we just thought we would be consistent with the other section.
That's a
With
good
town
idea.
manager, so. We do have a couple other ordinances that we've worked on, we're actually gonna be meeting John and Pam next week, that get a little bit further into the I&I issue, which he's gonna be talking about. Talks about what's gonna happen when we encounter I&I, what levels of severity these particular issues will be designated, you know, based on whether it's an illegal connection versus a break in their service line. But these were the two pretty clear-cut, easy ones to get out of the way first. It'll be followed by two trailer bills. we call them.
Seems to me that's serious enough to warrant being done on an emergency basis.
What's that?
Well, without a second hearing.
Oh, on these
second
ones,
reading,
yeah, these ones are, I think some of these ones we've had here, the effect of, and when you say emergency, some of these are so simple that, you know, I think there are some ordinances as a matter of rule, like for instance, the procurement one. I think that one should take two readings, even though we're not really changing anything, we're basically eliminating an entire section and replacing it with, you know, two clauses saying that we're gonna follow with the Procurement Act. I think you need to weigh, this is just my advice, you just need to, I'm not allowed to give advice to the council, it's not third parties, okay. My advice is that, you know, you kind of weigh you consider the impact that it would have on the entire community and whether or not dispensing of a second reading. I think in these ones, doesn't really have a major, you know, a major public impact since it's mostly administrative. So, but I think the previous section said it was only in an emergency. Is that what we deemed it as? Okay. So if it's not an emergency,
If it's not an emergency, the way I understand it
Yeah.
now is that we have a public hearing, the motion of the public hearing can be to approve the ordinance and dispense
Right.
with the second reading if that's what the council member wants to make. Otherwise, two readings are required. Is that correct, Cam?
Except not all of them require a public hearing, but yes, first
Okay.
reading and then
All right.
second reading.
okay.
But I think for what we had in mind is to clean up that one ordinance about the first and second readings, but do two readings of each of these till we get past that hurdle and make it clear, and then after that, we can probably dispense with most second readings.
So we have to clean up our own house before we.
Yeah, we have to, yeah. Even I'm confused now because we were gonna talk about cleaning up the process for the first and
I hate
second
that.
reading. And
Confused.
we're cleaning up our yeah. So I'll talk with Cam about it to make sure that we're consistent. But as of now, I think we probably should put this through a two reading, okay, a second
Okay,
reading.
council, you all be ready to vote on that for next meeting?
I worry about some sewer intensive thing coming along, you know, right outside the corporate limits.
Yeah,
And-
I know where you're going with that. I know where you're going with that. And let me
Being
have
hung
a-
on the horns of this dilemma.
Yeah, I mean, I think let me discuss that with Cam and John and see if that's something that you need to ask the council to do that, and we'll come up with a suggestion at the next meeting. We'll have it on the agenda in ordinance form, and if we feel it's appropriate, we'll make that recommendation
Okay.
to do that, okay.
Okay, is it, you all right with being on the agenda though?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
all right.
Be glad to do it now.
All right, item 5, discussion regarding recent infrastructure and infiltration sewer study, Mr. D.
Okay, good afternoon, council. I know I've spoken to you before to some degree about this study and maybe some of the results and some of the direction I think we're headed now, but we'll just briefly go over the purpose of the study and what we have discovered, some of the conclusions from the study. Basically, it was to take a look at our existing collection system and identify areas where we have issues with inflow and infiltration. That's the I&I. Basically, clean water getting into our system that ends up in our treatment plant taxes the capacity of our collection system getting to the plant, and then we're treating water that doesn't really need to be treated. So obviously, that's something that we want to take what steps we can to reduce. Don't know that it's possible to eliminate it all. I'm not sure if I know of any system that has eliminated it all, but the study was pretty extensive in taking a look at our system and identifying where we do have trouble. I think town managers want me to come speak today about the projects that we're getting started on at this moment or moving forward with, and then also discuss an area where we are at capacity right now, or really close to capacity in our existing systems. So we took the information from the study, and we have identified 2 projects that we are in the early stages of. We've already engaged a consultant on those to take a look at that for us. We're getting with them also to install flow meters so that we can do analysis on our line capacity and performance before and after we do the work that that we feel like we're going to need to do on these projects. The 2 locations are East Valley and Walden Road, sewer line through there that has identified I&I problems, and it has an existing grade problem. A portion of that line is essentially flat, which is not good for a gravity system. So we're looking to address that with this project. And then we're also looking at force main replacement in the exit 19 area. It's the force main that serves the Southview area. We've had 4 ruptures of that line in the last I think it is 8 to 10 years, and it's always really disruptive to not only the sewer system, but also the ruptures have occurred where the line is in East Main Street. So that's had a pretty significant impact on traffic as well. So those are the 2 projects we're getting started with. One of the other areas identified in the study was the exit 19 area, which is currently served by a combination of both gravity lines and force mains coming from as far away as the hospital out on Route 11. Ends up going through a pump station at Watauga Road, Route 58 Watauga Road. And currently that pump station, and that pump station eventually pumps it through Mead Meadows and Country Club area to our main interceptor that goes into the treatment plant. Currently, that pump station and those lines are near capacity, so we certainly have concerns about that. The study did identify some strategy to try to address that and try to, again, determine or identify where exactly we have I&I problems in that area and try to correct those so that we can regain some of that capacity. So I didn't know if there was any other questions or other specifics you want to cover.
If I can add something to that, and as a result of that study, we have, and John has been integral in that, we've included in the capital improvement plan most of the recommended projects that we feel are necessary over the next 5 years.
Over the next 5 years,
to
yes.
accomplish.
Yeah.
And I think there's about the 2 that we've put in there for next year would be I think the Walden Road.
The 2 that, yeah, I
the 2 that
just
you
mentioned
at
those
the
2.
beginning. Yeah, and so just so you know, those recommendations are being implemented or at least programmed into the capital improvement plan. So,
John, I have, Vice Mayor Patterson's sent me a note. Have both of those studies been finalized completely yet?
I don't know that we've received the final document. I probably ought to check with Tyler because he's been.
My question is, when we receive the final document, could you put that on put it for public view
Yeah, I think certainly, yeah.
Yeah, I think we've got the final draft, but we don't, I think you're right, I don't know if we have the final.
When we get the final
Yeah.
document so that everybody can
Right.
Sure, yeah.
see that. Okay,
Thank you.
Mhm.
thank you.
Thank you, John.
All right,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
John.
Thanks.
The item number 6, discussion regarding an alternative election of mayor and town council at the November election. Mr. Moran.
All right. A couple council members had brought this up to me, and we mentioned it, I think briefly at the last meeting, that we would be discussing this in more detail. In the packet, there is a section of the Virginia Code and a section of our code. And the question is whether or not we are going to, or we would consider moving our municipal elections from the spring until, to a general election, which is in the fall. And I know a couple of you, I guess we previously had discussed this issue before I was here and kind of tabled it. And I think the impression I got from a couple of the council members was, let's kind of bring this issue to a closing and make a decision. Either we're gonna not do it, or we're gonna discuss it more and consider it. So,
We had a citizen, Mr. Macbeth,
okay,
who brought it to our attention, and then we tabled it. And I would love for you to speak with Mr. Macbeth, Jimmy, if
Okay.
you would, just to hear what he has to say and why he believes that we should change this to November.
okay. One of the issues that was brought up was the cost. And Kim got that information from the election authority. And I think it was like maybe $4,000, approximately $3,000 or $4,000, and that's every 2 years. So, okay, so in 2016 it was about $3,700, and in 2018 it was almost $4,000, so just under $4,000. Excuse me. So that information, I just wanted to make sure it was available. So in the grants, if you're just looking at costs as a reason to do it, in my opinion, I think that wouldn't be a compelling argument just because it's such a small money. I mean, in the grant, in a $20+ million budget that we have, $4,000 expense isn't really a big percentage. If that's the compelling reason to do it, I don't think it's compelling. If there are other reasons why, you feel it should be done, I've heard voter participation, the turnout is higher in a fall election. A counter argument to that is when you have that many elections at one time, or that many races at one time, are municipal issues coming to the forefront? And are they getting drowned out by all the other messaging? Because usually in a general election, you're getting Congress, president. How many candidates for sheriff did we have? 4. So those are all things you have to think about. Yes, the turnout is higher, but are they getting informed? Because of all the other noise that's out there. So, I mean, I think there's arguments on both sides, and I'm just there to help facilitate the decision making. I'll certainly reach out to Mr. Macbeth if you'd like me to.
From what I read in the packet, if I interpreted it correctly, we can't take any action between January 1st and May anyway, so we don't need this.
Correct. Like any action that you would take would not be effective until the next election anyway, so it wouldn't affect this upcoming election. Yeah.
So you're gonna get back with us.
I was just gonna add, and I guess this happens in other places, but it would be an interesting scenario where you come in mid-fiscal year. Now you start July 1, beginning of the fiscal year. If you were elected and started January 1, you would be in the midst of a separate council's fiscal year.
In appointments. Appointments. You probably have to change our appointment process
Sure.
the year, time of year.
Well, I just want to say that, Mr. Macbeth has previously, I don't know if he's come to every council member,
He
but
used to.
member, has he spoken to you directly? He did, didn't he?
Yes, he has.
Okay.
Yes, he
And he's
has.
spoken to me directly, and he's come to meetings expressing this as well, and I would, would like for you to talk to him as well. But all the issues that you just said, voter participation, but what concerns me about it is the issues can get lost in a general election with local town council issues. But I do want to say for clarity that I was told, and I don't remember who told me, and so I want to clarify that I was wrong, that they told me that the $2,000 mark is about how much money we were spending on the election. So thanks for the correction, and I apologize to anybody that I told wrongly, but that was the figure that I got from someone prior, I think, management. Don't know who it was.
It could have been a previous year, I mean, it could have been an older number too.
Could have been.
I mean, the numbers, 16, 18.
Well, when Cindy and I ran, I'm pretty sure Mr. Lyle told me that the cost was like $2,700 or something like that. And we ran in, what year we were running,
2016.
Yeah.
Well, that could have been 2014 numbers, you know what I'm saying? Because 2016 numbers wouldn't have been probably known maybe until after the election.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it could have been.
I just try to give the facts and correctly as possible.
Well,
so.
there was some information
Yeah.
out there around between $2,000 and $3,000.
Thank you, Mr. Craig.
I'm not very good at politics, but I just don't like the situation where the town elections are governed by like three to 500 people. I think it should be open to greater participation than that.
Why do you think they don't come out to vote?
Because it's in it's in May, you know.
Well, if they cared about the municipal government, you think they'd come out?
We're not very excited.
Yeah, maybe we need to get better candidates.
We need to put one
I
of
better keep
those.
my mouth shut.
Well, I can see both sides, because people might get more informed. I mean, you're thinking that they're not informed enough, that you wouldn't want to put it in November.
Well-
But if they knew that they were going to have to vote in November when they went to the polls, they might, find themselves thinking, well, let me find out about this and see who's running. So, I mean, I can see both sides of that.
Well, I can too, Donna. My concern with moving it, and I agree with Al that we certainly would like for more people to vote. But my concern with moving it is that the political parties will come into play. Because in the county, their election is by party. And I'm just afraid that people will try to figure out whose party a candidate is in. And in a town election, I don't think party politics has any place. So I'm worried about that.
Yeah, it's a good issue.
My friend on the Damascus Town Council says they are very happy with having
Yeah,
switched.
that's a good idea. Maybe we ought to talk to some of those council members up there. Maybe I'll change my
They
mind.
switched it to November.
Yeah.
I don't know about you all, but I'm not ready to vote on this.
Right.
I just hope that if it does get moved, that the issues don't get lost in parties. I really do. I really
That's
hope
what
that.
bothers me. Okay. Item number 7, discussion regarding handicap parking on Main Street. This is John Dewey then. Man, you're getting the workout today, aren't you?
You're tired of seeing me, aren't you? I can see it in your eyes.
You getting overtime, John?
I think,
You getting overtime?
yeah, no. I'm not even getting paid, I'm just happy to be here. No, I think the discussion is based on maybe discussion at a previous meeting where we had a citizen come up and talk about handicap parking on Main Street, or I think, in her opinion, lack of handicap parking on Main. And I think my role here should be, or needs to be, presenting handicap parking on any street in town, really, and what is required to meet ADA guidelines or regulations, because that's you know, we've all seen it in our own town, and anywhere you travel, sometimes there's handicap signs up for parking on some pretty busy streets that have just kind of been a legacy or something that's been in place for many, many years. And the ADA requirements have kind of leapfrogged or passed those spaces by as far as what's required. I mean, to be a legal on-street handicap space in a parallel parking situation like we have on Main Street, you have to have a 6 to 8 foot area beside the vehicle, basically to unload wheelchairs or anything like that out of an accessible van. Similar to what you see in parking lots, you know, typically with a handicap space, you'll see a paired blocked off space that is just there for access in and out of the vehicle. So to meet ADA requirements, to have an on-street space that's legally provided for the handicap, we would need to have that section adjacent to the space, like on the sidewalk side. So in some cases, we have where you have just 5 foot sidewalks, and that's as much right-of-way as we have. We simply don't have the room to put those spaces in. Some of the places where we do have that space, you know, where the sidewalks are 6, 8, maybe some cases maybe even 10 feet wide, we would have space to install that, but then you do get into issues it creates for pedestrians walking in that area as well. And it does designate or dedicate a space to handicapped persons only, whereas nobody else would be able to park there. You know, we've talked about this recently quite a bit about it's in the right-of-way and on the streets. It's a balance between providing for the motorists and providing for the people that are parking and providing for pedestrians all within that right-of-way. So my personal feeling, or I guess would consider my professional opinion, is any chance we have to provide that parking off-street is far better from a safety aspect, because it's just, as everyone can imagine, it's just not safe to try to have that exiting the vehicle, parking and exiting the vehicle along a busy roadway like that, especially on Main Street with as much traffic as we have going through that area. And I have recently had conversations with a couple of places that have requested that space on Main Street, but when we were able to have discussions and identify parking, handicap parking that did exist off-street on their property, I think eventually they realized that it is far safer for them to park behind the building or in the parking lot away from the traffic. So that's been the experience I've had here in the last few weeks, and I'm welcome any questions you might still have or any further discussion. But that's where I want to make you aware of the requirements for a legitimate and ADA compliant handicap space, but then also tell you the conversations I've had recently.
John, are there any requirements for, any ADA requirements that you have to have so many spaces on the street? Or
on a street, on a public street, I'm not aware of any requirements for that. Now, when I know you're aware that when we have a development and you build or construct a building or a business on a piece of property, then there are code requirements for handicap parking in there.
I've never seen one. I just wondered if.
I'm not aware of any, no.
Well, can we pass this information? She works for the barter. Can we pass this
Certainly.
information on to her?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
I had a discussion with that lady not long ago about this and told her essentially what John had said.
Oh, okay.
But it probably wouldn't hurt to reinforce that a
Yeah.
little bit. It's just too dangerous to put the town into that kind of jeopardy to allow handicap parking in spaces that are too narrow for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say the parking space we had, they would have to directly get out into the traffic.
Right.
And there's no place really to unload except in that busy street.
No.
And also, I wonder about the fairness, because if we only had one parking place, I'm sure there's multiple handicapped folks that will be going to the barter. And what's fair? I mean, how can we, make that fair?
I guess what we talked about just a minute ago about developments or places with, commercial places with parking, off-street parking, they are required to have a certain number of spaces, and that is based on research and data and a typical demand. So, that element is in there. I certainly wouldn't argue that there aren't times when there's too few spaces in a parking lot. I know it happens, but I think that was all the governing bodies that came up with those regulations. I think that was their attempt to be fair, or as fair as possible, and set those requirements for so many spaces per total number of spaces.
And then
Remember, the
develop-
barter has a parking lot of its own over here
Right.
across the street.
Right.
And I guess there are handicap spaces designated there.
There are.
There's at
But
least
they're
3 or 4.
removed from the theater itself. And the only other opportunity they would have for handicap spaces is behind the barter theater, where there's staff parks.
Right.
And that's removed from the theater entrance also.
And we
So
have one in our parking lot too, behind this building. That
Yes.
They can also
Yeah,
access
there's
it.
certainly one here that could be used.
Yeah, and as Mayor Craig questioned about, is there any, requirements on Main Street? That would be my concern, is how would we make it fair if there's no requirements on Main Street, just how many that we could have. So, but like you
You
said.
can't do it safely.
Yeah, I know, not on this side. I mean, I got you. But, good luck with that. And I
Yeah,
hope that we
it's-
do have some kind of resolution. It's
It's
a tasking
challenging
job,
and-
yeah.
And, certainly we want to do what we can to help, but and like I've explained to the people I've had conversations with recently, if I thought it was the safer alternative to have the parking on the street, that's what I would advocate for. But it's clearly safer to have them park off-street wherever it's available.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Thank you,
Thank you.
John.
Okay, item number 8, discussion regarding recycling. Vice Mayor Patterson.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to tell you that I've been discussing some recycling information with Mr. Joe Benedetto with RDH Services in Roanoke, Virginia. And we have the honor and privilege of having him to speak with us today about possibly some services that he would have to offer the town of Abingdon. Could you come up and speak, Mr. Benedetto?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you a little bit about our company and some of the things we do for the city of Roanoke. We do have 2 recycling facilities within the city of Roanoke. One of them we specifically have to handle the single stream residential recycling that's collected currently by the city of Roanoke. We handle the processing of the material that's collected, separation into the individual components, and then the marketing of that product. Vice Mayor Patterson and I have been talking a little bit about recycling, and potentially that's something that we could work with the city of Abingdon here on developing some type of a similar recycling program. Currently, the recycling markets are very challenged right now. We have seen very low commodity prices, but as a facility in Roanoke, and having been in the industry for many years, we do have markets for product, and we are able to recycle 85% of what the city of Roanoke brings into us. The other 15% that is not recyclable is product that's not part of the recycling program. So I do have a flyer I can share with you that will show you some of the things that we do recycle for the city of Roanoke. I can also leave you with a business card. Currently, if we were to talk about a program here, we potentially could offer things such as collection of material from the residents, as well as the processing of material. When we initially looked at this, one of the thoughts that we had was to offer the collection and then to bring the material back to our facility in Roanoke. There are a couple of other options that may be available if we could find a small facility somewhere here in the area where either we could do some limited processing or at least bring material to put into larger equipment, larger trailers to bring to Roanoke a little more cost effectively. I'm also available to answer some questions, and I'd be happy to go ahead and talk further if this is something that you all would like to pursue.
I'd like to say that it's been a long, I mean, I don't know that we've ever had glass recycling in Abingdon. I talked to, a long time ago, Mr. Howard. Mr. Howard, he was one of our council members at the time, and he said, I wish that we had some place to put glass and recycle. And you do recycle glass, don't you?
Yes, we accept glass from the city of Roanoke, and our program in Roanoke is not just for the city of Roanoke, but for all the surrounding communities. We also work closely with the Montgomery Regional Solid Waste Authority, which is Christiansburg, Blacksburg, Montgomery County, Virginia Tech. And they have a program where each individual community will collect material and bring it to their facility, and at their facility, they then transfer it into large trailers and then cost effectively bring it to our facility in Roanoke. And that was one of the things potentially, again, that we could look at here in helping to save some of the transportation dollars if we were not able to do processing in this area. So this area doesn't really have a lot of recycling options. Actually, as we go into the Tennessee area, the recycler there that used to provide some recycling services coming up into this area of Virginia closed down their operations. So we do see the potential to expand and to offer recycling services, not only here locally in this area of Virginia, but potentially into the Tennessee area. And the more communities and the more opportunities we have to offer this service, the more likely that we could conceivably set up a recycling facility in this area and cost effectively offer a solution for recycling.
Interesting.
Yeah, I
Sure.
think, John, you talked about these trailers. I had gotten an inventory list from John about, we have a bunch of equipment right now that's just not being used, and you had mentioned trailers, and we have 3 recycling trailers.
We have
Right.
trailers that compartmentalized trailers.
Okay.
We set them up locally at different places, and
Are they like cardboard?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And plastic,
Plastic.
without the
There you go.
lids.
Right, and then, yeah, we had to tailor what we accepted based on the place we took it, what they would accept.
We took it down there?
We took it, down, we initially took them to Kingsport, then we found that there was a place in Bristol that took the material.
Okay.
But it was limited to plastics and aluminum, paper,
Cardboard.
and then cardboard. They were, trailers you could pull behind on a gooseneck. They weren't like large trailers, but they worked, or they served the need. And then we also had a curbside service that was picked up by Waste Management. But all that's been discontinued. We still have some of the equipment. Is it okay if I ask a question or a couple questions?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Your recycling program with Roanoke, is it single stream recycling, or does everything have to be separated out?
We do offer a single stream
Single stream.
recycling program for the city of Roanoke.
Okay.
Some of the surrounding communities do offer their residents a drop-off program, which would be similar to the program you just described with the trailers, where the
Right.
trailer sits in a location and then people bring material to the trailer and deposit it in that. In some of the communities, they have continued with a dual stream or separation of material at those drop-off centers, but that's not something that we require. So
Okay.
we do, again, offer the single stream and the collection, and we do accept the plastics and the paper and the glass and the tin cans and the aluminum cans and all that in our program with the city of Roanoke. And that's what, that's something that we could propose.
Okay, and if there's, obviously there's a cost for the service and separating, processing and all that, but is the, just for the commodity itself, is it neutral cost-wise, or does the locality get charged just to even accept the material, or does the locality even get any revenue back for the material itself?
Yeah, at this point in time, there is no revenue
Right.
available because the commodity
Right.
prices don't cover the cost of the program. At this point in time, For many communities, there's not only a collection cost, but what we call the processing cost. Recycling used to be something that was a little more cost-effective than trash collection because of the value of the commodity. At this point in time, it's probably comparable to what it costs to collect trash. In other words, there's a cost to provide the collection, and then instead of having a landfill cost for disposal, there's a processing cost to help offset the.
And I'll add, just for context, what he described is the way it used to be for the town. The town used to get a check back from the place where they took the recycled material for the commodities or, for the material. That went away probably
3 or 4
early
years,
mid-2000s, really. And ever since then, it's just been a total cost. Like you said, it's basically you're paying either to throw it away in a landfill or to
recycle.
You're paying either way at this point based on the commodity.
In some of our more recent contracts, and again, because there is a charge in our newer agreements, we've worked it out where depending on commodity pricing, there could be a small revenue share if we do see commodity pricing come back. But it would admittedly be a minimal revenue share. And I don't see commodity prices coming back over the next year or so. I'm just kind of looking in my crystal ball. But at some point in time, recycling was a very viable and a cost-effective program because the value of the commodity that was collected had value.
So, yeah, I think it's fair to say, if there was a facility like this nearby, we would still be participating in both curbside and trash, more than likely. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't. The difference here being the distance currently to Roanoke.
Right. Well, what I would hope to see is, if we get this done, if we can, if Mr. Benedetto can help us with this, and maybe we can get a transfer, he can bring some business down here with his a new transfer station, and maybe our fees would go down because you wouldn't have to truck it all the way to Roanoke as well. And it would help the community with the transfer station here. It would just be more, we need to promote recycling a lot more than what was done in the past. Some of the citizens have complained to me that there was no promotional materials, there was no big ordeal about recycling. They actually said they want to see the town hall being, green 100%. So that's kind of my hope, that we will get involved in recycling, get the recycling back on its legs. And this is just kind of the step in the right direction, in my opinion. So the one thing about the recycling trailers, I loved them because they were like at the police department and also up at the Coombs Center. But the complaints I had was that, and of course you had no control of this, Mr. Dew, but they were packed full to the brim and they weren't moving them quick enough to where the other citizens could come up and put their things in there. It was just too overcrowded. They couldn't get anything more in there. Now, that could be the county folks as well, so we might want to talk about that in the future, about county and town.
Right,
So,
and that was the reality. When we put the trailers out there, we knew, there wasn't any way to enforce it.
right.
We really were we discovered or found a way that we thought could fill a gap that was missing in the curbside, and obviously it was successful because you're right, the trailers got filled up in a hurry.
Yeah, they
On the
did.
weekends, when we didn't have staff available, they would get filled up quite often. And then we would try to empty them, Monday morning, but still, that is an experience. That's an experience at a lot of localities. I know where I currently take my cardboard, that's a reality, is a lot of times I'll go there and it's overflowing. But it's just an unmet need right now, basically, where we're at. And a lot of localities are facing the same thing.
Mr. Benedetto, would you be willing to enter into discussions with Mr. Dew and Mr. Morani about costs and extent of the collection services? And I'd love to get ABingdon back into recycling if we can.
Sure, I'd be happy to continue some type of discussions. We haven't put a pencil really down to cost at this point in time. more so wanting to understand what you all would like or conceivably like. So the more we can understand what needs there might be to fill, then, we can go back and start looking at some costs and see how we can help you all.
One thing that I talked to John about last week was, even if there's a way where there was an arrangement where if we have this equipment and we leased it, or however, whatever arrangement there was, I mean, that could be taken into consideration. Ultimately, whatever we do, we still have to go through the procurement process, but I'm also aware that this is not like a huge, like he's from 2 hours away.
Yeah,
You know,
that's right.
I mean, so I, there aren't many out there that are doing what you do, but we would still have to go through that process. But I think maybe it would help us if we get an idea as to what it is, it's feasible, because right now, as it stands, wherever we're taking it, it's 2 hours away, no matter where we're going. I mean, it's a minimum of 2 hours to bring any of this recycling material.
You'll have to nail down the scope of it before you could even do
Right,
the.
right. I mean, I think
Yeah.
we have to determine, because wasn't it not, the closest place from here would be Knoxville, I think, isn't that what
Right.
somebody said? Okay.
Yes,
So yeah, if you could leave your card.
Sure. So
Give it to John, and then I'll get it from him.
Sure, I can
John,
do
do
that.
you know if the county, do they have any recycling at all?
I think they've removed theirs.
Yeah, they did. I confirmed that with Mr.
They
Berry.
have some?
Yeah.
What-
They
Yeah,
used to have.
that's what my next,
Oh, okay, go
Yeah.
ahead. So
no, you go ahead. I was just,
Yeah,
I
and I
would suggest that you all let
Right.
Jason know about this.
Yeah, well, I actually told him last week that we were gonna be talking about this, and I asked him if they were doing recycling at all anywhere, and he said no. And I told him that I would follow up with him after
Oh,
this
good.
meeting.
And it sounds
With
like
any
from the
information.
discussion earlier, he may be able to tell us is what it would take maybe
To reduce
extract
it,
a
yeah.
facility down here, because it'd be great if we could get all the localities, including the counties,
Oh, yeah.
enough to create enough demand
Yeah.
for a company like this to
Right.
locate a facility down here. I don't know that there's the demand there or not. You all may or may have not done the research at this point to see if there's enough demand down here. We
And-
could start that discussion.
Yeah.
And we believe when this whole thing started a couple of years ago, I had done a little bit of research in this area, and we found the same thing that has happened is that there really wasn't a recycling company in this area, and a lot of recycling companies, or a lot of recycling programs were being discontinued. We felt there was demand, a small amount of demand in this area of Virginia, a small amount of demand in Tennessee, the Kingsport, Johnson City area, and we thought collectively there was an opportunity to support a recycling facility. Our biggest challenge has been working through this, has been finding some time to come down here and really research this. And quite frankly, we are a Virginia-based company, but we would need to start pushing into the Tennessee area to really make this thing work. It doesn't mean that we couldn't make it work with Virginia, but we would want to try.
In order to get a
work with it.
facility here is what you're saying.
Yes, yes, and there's a couple of different options we are working on also with some newer technology where to put an entire facility in requires a bigger expense and a more volume to run through it, and we're looking at trying to scale down the size of the facility and potentially do partial processing in a locale like this, and then complete the processing in Roanoke with a smaller volume of material. And to explain that a little further, one of the concepts we're working on right now is a lot of these recycling programs have the fiber, the paper products, and then they have the different container products. And so the fiber products, we think we could conceivably process locally, and then the containers, which are about 30% of the volume, we could conceivably send that out to Roanoke, where we've made the investment in the machinery to separate all those, and that's something we're starting to explore also. So it brings me here to revisit this market, Tennessee and Virginia, and to see if maybe a different concept, one that we hadn't thought about a couple of years ago, might work. So I think there's some opportunities potentially.
Have you had experience with your receptacles or the drop-off locations with contamination? Because that seems to be a big issue. We had in a municipality that I previously worked, Republic Services yanked it because they were just getting too much trash. People were dumping TVs in there. It was horrible.
Like you said, 85% is what typically.
Well, that's in the
Approximately 15% contamination is what we are seeing right now.
just in those bins.
Yeah. And that's-
Oh, okay. I thought you meant that was your overall.
And that's our facility in Roanoke. So the overall facility in Roanoke,
Yeah.
we have about 15%.
But I always like that those bins are more susceptible to contamination
Sure.
than the curbside recycling, because they have ownership over that recycling bin.
Right.
Yes,
Control over it.
sometimes they can be, yes.
Okay.
Any more
Is-
questions,
Is there
council?
anything else I can?
Yeah.
I'd like to thank Ms. Patterson for plugging us in with Mr. Benedetto here and bringing him in.
My pleasure.
But I think the council has discussed this about as long as we need to, and let's see if we can work something out.
Yeah.
Sure.
Get some
Thank you
information
very
about
much.
it. Give everything to John, and then give him a couple of your cards, and that way we each can have one.
Sure.
Or if you wanna bring, yeah.
Copy, I can-
I hope there's a site somewhere we could fix him up with, perhaps.
Thank you.
Be thinking about that, you and
I
Tanya.
will.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Dew, maybe you can think of a site as well that we might have that would be accommodating to Mr. Benedetto.
Yeah, we have.
It could be possible that something like that would probably be better suited for, potentially for the county too, because
Want to pass it down?
typically, I mean, you're probably not in the city limits of Roanoke, your facility, is it?
One of them is, yes.
Oh, one of them is?
Yeah,
Okay.
one is within the city and one is just outside the city.
Probably depends on the type of facility, if it was like a,
We do usually locate in industrial facilities.
right, I'm saying, our industrial zoning is somewhat limited here in town, but.
Sure, I understand.
But, we were able to work a partnership with the county, we, potentially be able to find something, so.
Thank you so much.
Sure, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benedetto.
Okay, the next item is unfinished business, discussion regarding a lease agreement between the town of Abingdon and the senior services center. Ms. Miller.
Yeah. This is just the final draft of the agreement for use of the community center property for a pickleball court. There is an exhibit attached at the back of the document. The community center has reviewed this. I've sent it to Ernie, and he's gotten necessary sign off, where I don't know what his process is, but ultimately it would still have to be approved by, a final approval by their board, or the owner of the property. So really, this is just a final review before it goes to full council. We'll have to conduct a public hearing because it is a lease, so there'll be a public hearing. And Cam, does it have to go through just a public hearing and then approval? There doesn't have to be 2 readings, just a public hearing, okay? So my intent is just to put it on the next agenda. We'll have the public hearing, so long as we can meet the public notification requirements. Otherwise, it would probably be put on the following meeting. Is it 10 days? She's gonna give us, anyhow. Is it 7 days? Okay.
Okay, council, will you be ready to vote on this? Should we?
It might be the following meeting, Mayor. We might
I
not.
understand.
Yeah.
You ready to go?
I'm ready to vote on it now.
You want to vote on it now?
Can't vote.
Al,
It wouldn't
See,
be
if we-
anything.
I'm telling you, you're gonna get us put in jail, man.
If this was called a meeting instead of a study session, we could vote on it and get it
No, we
done.
could-
No, we
have
can
a public
vote, we
hearing.
just have to have a public
You
hearing.
get to have a public hearing.
This is a meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. You could vote on it if you want to, but then, like you said, we're all gonna go to
We're
jail.
gonna be in jail?
Mr. Bill, it's a work session.
Work session.
It is a work session.
Under statute, it's still
Voting on
considered.
it if we-
But I know it's a meeting.
Meeting law includes work session.
If there's 3 of us, there's a meeting. It's a
right.
meeting, I understand.
Yeah, we can vote on it. Matters not on the agenda. Anybody got any matters not on the agenda? Reports from council and staff. Any council member want to report, or staff want to report? Speak
I've
now,
been
forever
very
hold your
busy.
peace. Okay, the next
Busy
item on
too.
the agenda is adjournment. I declare this meeting adjourned.
Can I make that motion?
He's dying to make a motion. Let him make that motion. That's something.
I have been told I have the power to adjourn the meeting, so I want to reserve a little power
Is
for
it
the
cold
meeting.
in here? Or is it-
That's you.